Welcome to the Revenue Café. The Revenue Café podcast is brought to you by Breadcrumbs, the revenue acceleration platform. In each episode, we will bring you interesting conversations on all things sales, marketing, and CX related. The hope is we will help you along the path to revenue acceleration and entertain you along the way.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Revenue Café. As always, I'm joined by Joe Aicher, and so lucky to be joined this week by Tim Fagan, head of revenue operations at Jampp. Tim, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, so excited to have you. Looking forward to our chat. Maybe just to get everybody kind of situated, you can share a little bit about yourself and Jampp, just to give us some context.
Yeah, sure. So I handle all of our sort of sales strategy, operations stuff at Jampp, and I was previously doing this for another company called Ogre, and before that was in venture capital. And if you're wondering, Jampp is, we say, the programmatic platform to grow your app. So we work with really all sorts of publishers and really any company that has a huge app presence, and we help them acquire new users or re-engage churned users. So yeah, programmatic advertising.
Cool. And how'd you end up there? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so it's been a little bit maybe unconventional. So kind of when I was in college, I was a pre-med student, and I was thinking I wanted to go to med school and all of that. But I also was super interested in entrepreneurship, and I felt like I was always learning about all these new companies and all this stuff that was going on in like the tech world, and all this stuff that seems to me was a lot more interesting than all the biology and stuff I was taking. And I started building an app, and I did that for a little while, and then that got me interested in venture capital because I was talking to VCs and that kind of stuff. Went to work for a VC fund, and then kind of came back to this whole like I want to go start a business someday. And with that in mind, I was like, I should go work at a startup and learn how to build a business.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that brought me to Ogre, and then from there to now Jampp, doing similar kind of stuff. But yeah, the kind of goal is still the same, like learning how to build a company so that when I do it eventually, I know what I'm doing.
Right.
Kind of the idea. Yeah.
That's cool. I
Yeah.
always wonder, like, where does everybody that went to business school work? Because
Right.
it almost seems like, like I was almost a lawyer. I got a poli-sci degree and was about to go to law school, and then decided to shift. Everybody that I've worked with, most entrepreneurs I've met, almost none of them have a formal business education.
Yeah.
So like, where do all the biz school graduates work? They must all work at like
Consulting
McKinsey
firms and investment banks and stuff.
yeah,
Massive
yeah.
companies.
Right. Which is like to me the way less fun side of
Yeah.
business.
Yeah. And I don't know, I like you bring up business school and stuff. Like I really thought about that, and I still do sometimes, mostly because I feel like I see a lot of people do it, and it seems like, oh, maybe I should be considering it or whatever. But I don't know. My logic has just kind of been, if I go work somewhere like a startup where I can do a bunch of different stuff, I can get paid to learn, and why not just do that instead of dropping a couple $100,000 for a great business degree?
Yeah,
Um,
no, I would
just
tend to agree with you. I'm a huge fan of post-secondary education. I think it's formative for people and their minds and how they think and how they end up working.
mhm.
But I really cut my teeth working at BlackBerry for almost 6 years.
Yeah,
I can't imagine a better education in business than going through what that company went through, going through it with them.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I think the notion of apprenticeship is kind of like relegated to trades, but I think it makes a ton of sense in business, right? Get in there, start working as a BDR, start making phone calls, work your way into the marketing team. Then move over to
I think
the
you just
finance
broke up a
team
little
and do
bit for
some
me.
work there. What's that?
You just kind of broke up a little bit for me, but
Oh,
um,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, just
I
the
don't know. I don't
idea
know
of
if it was just
like
on my side. I don't know if Joe said it too, but whatever.
it's just the I was just going down the path of like the idea of like get into a business after school, work your way through a couple different departments, find what your passion is,
Hmm.
and I think that's like the best way to learn.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I feel like it's kind of the same thing as getting your MBA, but in real life. But also, what do I know? Because I never got an MBA, so I don't really know what
Well,
I'm
yeah, yeah,
comparing
yeah,
it
for
to.
sure.
I just assume. So,
Same here. Same here.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
cool. So you were telling us about some developments at Jampp and kind of like what that's meant for you lately. Like, do you want to share a little bit
yeah,
about that?
yeah, sure. So in I guess June, I think it was June, we were officially acquired by a company called Affle, which is an India-based ad tech company. It's a publicly traded company on the Indian Stock Exchange, and so it's been a really cool experience. Our business hasn't really changed in terms of how we operate. We're still like totally independent, which is great for us. We can still kind of keep doing what we do best. Um, but in terms of my role, it's definitely had a pretty big impact. I've never been a part of an acquisition before, and I've never been a part of uh, a public company before. So we've changed all of our like the way we do all of our reporting and stuff like that. Like all the forecasting that comes out of my team is uh, now being shared, kind of to the broader world. So
Right.
it's there's a lot, you know, there's a lot that kind of goes along with that in terms of audits and checks and balances and stuff. But it's been really cool. Yeah.
So like exciting, nerve-wracking. Like, how would you describe this period of
I
going
mean,
from a
just exciting. Yeah. I mean, I think anytime you get to the end of the quarter and you're wrapping up all of your, um, I mean, everything that comes with that, just getting the final numbers in terms of revenue and goal achievement and setting the targets for if it's the next year or whatever is always just like a stressful time. But um, now doing it as part of a public company somehow just feels more like kind of exciting, knowing that this is going to um, there's going to be there's a much wider audience for everything that we're doing, I guess. So,
yeah, that sounds
yeah,
great. Um, Maybe just to get into like the nitty gritty of it, because I think rev ops, sales ops, all these different ops teams. I think if you go from one organization to another, it means a slightly different thing everywhere. Maybe
yeah,
we can talk about like what does that look like for your organization?
yeah. So it's definitely different everywhere. And at Jamp and I guess kind of at my last company too, uh, sales ops or rev ops, I guess we use it sort of interchangeably. But it includes kind of all of the regular sales ops stuff. So obviously like, CRM administration, like that kind of stuff. Um, but then, and I guess like goal setting too, I guess you kind of put into generally sales ops, but also sort of like the sales related FP&A stuff rolls up into sales ops too.
Hmm.
And then at Jampp, as of like very recently, also business development. So Jampp didn't have like a business development team until recently. They didn't have sales ops until I started too. But
Right.
um, so now I manage the sales ops, like the pure sales ops stuff, and then the business development side too. So
So like, are we talking about like BDRs, SDRs, like
yeah,
that type of
yeah,
stuff?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that's rolling up into you.
Yeah, yeah. So when I started at my last company, I was doing biz dev and very quickly transitioned into more sales ops stuff because um, I kind of showed my boss that it would make more sense if we just outsourced it than having me do it. And so then I managed all the outsourced stuff and uh, then started taking on all these other like sales ops responsibilities.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
So
And so,
that's
do you have a
super interesting.
partner? Yeah, yeah, it's a very interesting setup for sure. Do you guys have you have a partner on
Yeah.
the marketing side? Do you have like a marketing ops team?
No, we don't have. I don't know about marketing ops, but we have a marketing team, and they sit in the um, basically on their half of the sales org. So our org structure is definitely a little bit different than most, I guess.
Yeah.
So um, my counterpart is he handles he manages all of the sales managers and or the sales reps and the marketing team, and then I handle sales ops and biz dev. Um, so uh, luckily, I would say our marketing team is pretty savvy when it comes to HubSpot and all that stuff. So
Yeah, yeah.
um, they I think there's a lot of like jacks of all trades in that group,
Yeah, yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, so like so given that that's kind of the setup at Jampp,
Mm.
the a lot of the I don't know what the right way to put it, the hype, a lot of the talk about RevOps is really this idea of bringing operations from across the customer facing teams, right? Marketing, sales, CS, kind
Yeah.
of under one umbrella, breaking down those silos. I guess like first, what are your thoughts on that as a concept? And then like, do you think that that's actually like a practical thing that can happen in most companies?
As in, like, can sales ops or rev ops be introduced in most companies? Is that,
Yeah, RevOps in
am I
like
understanding the correct question?
yeah,
Yeah.
RevOps in like in the sense of like all of these operational functions coming together across marketing, sales, and CS.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're all super related. And in order to run an effective sales org, they kind of, or effective revenue org, I should say, they really should be aligned. So I think that um, a good sales ops team kind of makes that happen. Um, and it starts with just having the CRM working the way that it should, um, and then building from there. But definitely,
Are you guys on
definitely agree with
Salesforce?
that. No, we use HubSpot.
You use HubSpot?
Uh, hmm
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, Tim, I think some of the things you're mentioning is like pretty familiar to where I was at a previous company where
yeah,
we had BDRs rolling up into the RevOps area, which is kind of an interesting kind
yeah,
of setup, right?
yeah,
But like talk about like getting like the CS team and some of those other teams kind of all in the same boat then. Like we're talking about like yeah, getting them all under one umbrella. Like for me, my experience was like we hired a CRO and all of a sudden the CRO is talking to the customer success team like, hey, you guys need to be upselling. You guys need to have some revenue goals, right? That are
yeah,
actually aligned, right? But having that team then come through into the RevOps team where we're enabling that, like, was kind of a pain in the ass, right? Like trying to get
yeah.
that all to operate. So was there like, yeah, like the similar tool set maybe helps everybody on HubSpot, but like, was there like friction getting, customer success or getting other teams to really buy into some of the things you're trying to do with sales ops, rev ops?
Yeah, I think uh, there definitely is because I mean, so I wasn't at obviously I wasn't at Jampp before I was there, but sales ops didn't exist at Jampp before February when I started, and
Mm,
um, so everyone had kind of their way of doing things that I think I mean, it worked. Like they were able to close deals and have happy customers and stuff like that. Um, it, the business worked, but it wasn't probably the most efficient. And so,
yeah.
I mean, I've spent a lot of my time in the last 10 months, kind of trying to make things more efficient there and really just streamlining the sales process, like the workflow for account management. And we
Mhm.
have all these, or had, I guess, still have, but all these sort of like silos and stuff where um, uh, so many different things happen like out of the CRM
Mhm.
that really should be there. So like all these side conversations of what happened in that conversation the other day with the client or whatever, salespeople chasing AMs chasing salespeople, people just, and that's just the way that they worked. And so getting people to start using the CRM as really the source of truth for like all things related to the customer and the workflow and who does what and that kind of stuff is been like it's been a challenge. I think people generally agree that this is a better way to work. If you zoom out and you think about it, like it's better for everything to be in one place. But when you've been doing things a certain way, yeah, it's definitely hard to get people to fully
Yeah.
adopt the new tools and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think, Gary and Gary obviously founded Breadcrumbs and I
yeah,
came early on, but like getting to start your own company, right? Like you get to know those things ahead of time because we've lived through it. Like you're talking about like entrepreneurship and like thinking about that. Like clearly these are things you'd want to bring, if you were starting from scratch, right?
right.
Like where to start and how to have all these teams kind of working cross-functionally really well, right?
Hmm. Yeah. I feel like if you're going to have a process that's important for the like some component of the sales process, like if it's important, it should be to some extent measurable. And so like there can't be things like, after the client says this, then you go and you create a Slack channel and you send an email or whatever. Like let's just do all that shit in one place where we can see what's actually going on with these deals and stuff. Um, so
Do you find that the biggest challenge though is like people? Like they're ultimately people are like creatures of habit. We
yeah.
all like have this instinct to like create systems and ways to simplify our world, and then getting somebody to change is like massive uphill battle.
No, I don't know. I don't think it's like it's the maybe the biggest challenge, but it's definitely a challenge. Like it's just um I would say it's mostly just because this is relatively new. Like for it's a new way of operating and people just kind of adjusting. But I'd say most of the things that we've changed uh, at Jampp so far, and then also like at my last company, once people get over that initial hurdle, everything's sort of fine. I feel like honestly, like the hardest part or the most challenging aspect of it is kind of um, trying to build like a system that works for like all the nuance because there's so many different um, there's so many things that like going through the sales process where I'm like process when I'm trying to learn it or whatever when I first started and I'm like okay so this is how it works so the process should be more like this and then I have a conversation with a single account manager who they have an account or something that's different and it's like wait this would totally not work for their setup. I was wrong about how this process works. And so it's just like finding something that actually works across the board where you don't end up with all these silos again. Because um, just like understanding all the details of the business, I feel like is actually what makes it challenging. Um,
So how do you solve for that? Like, or how did you solve for that?
but I feel like you kind of have to see yourself as an internal consultant, and just like you spend a lot of time with people across the org and ask tons of questions and say this is how I think it works. Is this is do you think this solution would help us would it would work for this problem or whatever? And then you ask that to five different people and hopefully you'll get a yes from all of them. But um, I think like that was I mean that's how I handled it. Like I just tried to talk to as many people as I could and understand what was going on and run my ideas by, you know, people and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I don't know. So spent a bunch of time at big companies, like I said, BlackBerry, Hootsuite,
yeah, yeah,
Canadian Tire, and sometimes like bringing as many people into the conversation is like actually the scariest part because it
yeah.
just makes it like,
Too many opinions and
oh my god, like snowball massively out of
yeah,
control, right?
yeah,
Obviously, you
yeah,
need the right people involved. Obviously, you need enough
yeah,
input to make it whatever it is that you're designing make it make sense.
hmm,
I've also found, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. I've found that like when building processes or um, focusing on like what like minimum viable footprints, Like, what is the smallest amount of things that need to be controlled or standardized to be able to like inform decisions, run reports, stay compliant, whatever those requirements are,
Yeah.
and like leave the rest of it alone. Like, what do you think about that? I think there's like, basically what I'm saying is I think there's a
Oh
tendency
yeah.
to try and over engineer or over control, right?
I totally agree. Yeah. Uh, I think like um, so we're kind of dealing with that sort of challenge right now with I guess with like the account management team. So they weren't really using HubSpot at all. Or they weren't at all using it.
So you mean the sales
For
team was not using the CRM?
sales was, but like salespeople were, but account managers were not.
Oh, so account
Um,
managers are like your in life, like after their customers.
like oh yeah.
Yeah, okay,
So
okay.
we launch a deal. Once the campaign is live, then it gets handed over to an account manager, and basically they manage it for the lifetime of
Right.
however
Okay.
long we
Yeah,
work with
yeah,
the
yeah.
customer. Yeah, they do all the upselling and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Um, so, but nothing that they were doing was in the CRM. So like if, for example, I wanted to do a forecast and take into account all of our opportunities for upselling or cross-selling or whatever, you know, that could not be taken out of the CRM. There's no pipeline for account
Right.
management.
Just a black hole.
So yeah, it's just you kind of guess or
Yeah.
make some, take some historical data, make an assumption or whatever. But which is obviously not ideal. So uh, to your point, like obviously we don't want to over engineer it because we want people to use it and we want it to be effective. And now that it should, at the end of the day, it shouldn't be a pain in the ass. Like it should be a better way of working. Um, and like the only challenge should be just like learning the new tool and not like, uh, you know, oh, now I got to tick all these boxes and I got to do all these drop down menus and all this stuff. And it takes 10 times longer to launch a campaign or whatever. Like that's not, that's obviously not what we want to go for. So with, um, with our account management team, we went for like super simple, um, uh, deal process just so we can start to measure pipeline, and getting people used to HubSpot, but, um, like, B, it doesn't really need to be that granular, in my opinion, especially for the existing business stuff. Like we put a proposal in front of them, it went through or it didn't. Okay, it's lost. It's we keep it super simple on that side for that reason. Um, and like when we do this is kind of the other thing. So like when we're working with HubSpot and you know all that stuff, I always try to think of it as though we have to think of the individual salespeople who are using it or the individual account managers as our customers. And so, if it's going to suck to use, then we're going to get shitty data out of it and it's not going to be good. So um, like there's obviously we need to have certain tick boxes and all that kind of stuff so we can track like key things like what product did you offer this client, like those kinds of things are important. But we try to do as much as we can with like the automations and stuff like that are built into HubSpot so that people don't need to like over
Yeah. So
report
you're
'cause
reducing
it
human
sucks.
burden.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Listen, I've sat in like meetings between ops, sales, and like marketing, and we're trying to get like a standardized list of dispositions, right? Like why did a deal get lost? Here's like a drop down.
Hmm.
And like to me, like a drop down once it's past like 5 options is kind of useless because people are just gonna pick
Yeah.
whatever's at the top. And I'm sitting with
Yeah.
and Mike or Joe knows who I'm talking about. I'm sitting with a sales leader, and there's like he's the one pushing for like 30 different reasons. And we're like, dude, we don't
Yeah.
we don't need
Yeah.
30 different
I,
reasons.
yeah. That's a very familiar conversation.
right? Like how actionable is
Because then what
like
are you going to do? Put it in a pie chart and have like a zillion different things in the pie? It's going to look, not useful at all.
100%?
Everyone will just pick yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. They're going to pick whatever the top, like
That
whatever
hits
the
home.
first thing in the drop down is, because they're just going to get past the requirement. But that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why we hired Joe, right? Like Joe's our head of sales, and doing a great job. We're like a young, fast moving startup. Um, but like we're all of the founders have many years of professional experience operating other companies, and we wanted to bring people in that like as they're building stuff, right? Because we're starting with a blank canvas. Like literally a little bit over a year and a half ago, Breadcrumbs did not exist.
Mm.
Um, who better like to build our sales processes than somebody who's been a seller for like many years and has also done the RevOps role, right? And understands
Yeah.
what is needed there, right? He knows what he's not willing to do as a seller because it's a waste of his time and he's not selling when he's doing it. And he knows what
Hmm.
the business is going to be asking for. And so he can help us build as we go to like Series A and hopefully IPO one day, knock on wood, right? He can help
Yeah.
us build the processes that make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
That
Joe?
makes
Are you doing
sense.
that? I hope you're doing
Yeah,
that.
have it. Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I mean, like having like a blank canvas in Hub. So we use HubSpot as well,
Mm.
and having like a blank canvas and like hopefully thinking a couple steps ahead from Gary and team to say like, hey, we're probably going to be asked what's going on with these outcomes here, right? Like on the outcomes thing,
Mm.
I should probably get that drop down built ahead of time, right? Like, and
Right.
so like, and having that like that forethought, which is kind of cool. I mean, because like we've been on this entrepreneur kind of idea a little bit where like if you had a blank slate, what would you do with it? How would you get these teams all working together?
Mm.
Yeah, being able to design it as you go is like it's kind of cool. Instead of having like kind of that fresh green out of college like sales rep who's like, hey, maybe they can sell the hell out of your product, but your HubSpot instance a disaster after they're done, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
so there's some
Yeah.
balance there. Maybe I could be a better sales rep, but you may not have the blend of the two. So
Yeah, I've
That
seen
makes
in my
sense.
career, Tim, I don't know about in yours, but I've gone into companies and they're at an inflection point in their growth or their maturity or demands from the board or their investment and their investors, and like literally they've been flying by the seat of their pants, growing, which is great. That's what we all want to do. But then they hit this inflection
Mm.
point, and it's like pull the emergency brake. We basically got to like
Yep.
rebuild this thing from scratch because we can never accomplish what we need to accomplish at this stage based on what we've done in the past. And having gone through that a handful of times, that's painful. Like it's ridiculously
Yeah.
painful. And it happens when like it's actually harder to grow, right? Like there's this kind of like increasing gravity. The bigger of a company you are, that growth gets harder, right? From 0 to 1 million is easy. Like that's the
Hmm.
step one. Going from 0 to 1 million is the easy part. Going from 1 million to 10 is hard. Going from 10 to 100 is really hard, and it just keeps getting
Hmm.
harder and harder, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Thoughts on that idea?
I mean, just how hard it is to scale after a certain point,
Well,
and
and then having like
like
a massive like
reaching that point.
structural or process issue be the thing that like slows you down.
I mean, that seems like a totally avoidable situation. Seems like you should, that's
Yeah,
why you
you
should
would you
hire
would
good
think,
sales
but
ops
you
people.
would think, but it happens.
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like um, we're sort of um, I feel like we're kind of at that point in some ways, not in that we're going to we're going to be doing $1 billion in revenue or something like we're not we're still growing really quickly and stuff, but I think like um, we kind of reached a point where we needed to start getting more organized about the way that we handle ourselves. And I think that's kind of why they decided that they should hire a sales ops person, 10 months ago or whatever. But um, uh, I think like it's I don't know, it's interesting. Like the what you need to do in terms of like getting yourselves, you know, more put together operationally and stuff, it changes at each step. Like, once when you're at when you're trying to go from 100 million to 500 million or whatever, like, okay, you probably have like some pretty like well structured like processes in terms of like target setting and forecasting and your budget process and all that kind of shit. But then there's like, um, uh, then there's just more and more granular stuff that needs to be fine tuned and everything. But it takes a totally different skill set at each stage, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I agree.
100%.
I think so. Gary and I at one of our previous companies, like just rolling in the customer success sales efforts into the forecasting
yeah,
was part of that next step, right? Which meant like bringing them onto like the right platform as everybody else, right? Like you
yeah,
mentioned with bringing them on HubSpot and
yeah,
giving them a process to follow, and then giving them forecasts and targets, right? Like never experienced that before, right? And like getting them, kicking and screaming to do it, right?
yeah,
And that's a problem you didn't think about from 0 to 1 million, right? But you thought about
yeah,
when you're at like 50 to 100, right? And you're like, how are we going to find more, and how are we
hmm
going to present it?
yeah.
Um,
Like we had a guy who like super smart guy who did like all the stuff that like I kind of do now, but when we were like a lot smaller. And he's
mhm.
he built out like a lot of the framework for these things, and now it just kind of like there was the way that we did it, which was like actually it was very good and sophisticated for where we were at as a company. And now we're just trying to make something that supports our size now. And as being, being part of a now a public company, all this stuff, like it's just, you know, I
Different
don't know.
level.
It's been interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, different level, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
So
sure.
I don't love like Team HubSpot and Team Salesforce all the time, right? Like it just use whatever works
Yeah.
and make it work. But it is
hmm
interesting to hear that you guys have like stayed on HubSpot when most companies they hit a certain level
Yeah.
they just go, hey, we need to go to Salesforce now. And
Yeah.
I'm a Salesforce fan, even though we use HubSpot, and I
Yeah.
think you can get some good data out of it. But I'm curious,
Yeah.
like why, what are your thoughts on tools like that and making the move, or what's required at a certain level?
Yeah. So when Diego hired me, he he expected that the first thing I was going to say was we need to switch to Salesforce, and he was like dreading it because the big, it's a big bill and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but honestly, I think maybe a few years ago I might have said that, but I think HubSpot has made a ton of improvements, and I've always felt like um, HubSpot is really good from an end user perspective. I think it's like very intuitive. Um, and the problem was that the reporting wasn't as great. Whereas I felt like Salesforce, you could get really good reporting and stuff, but it was total pain in the ass to use. Um, and I think they've done enough in terms of like quality of reporting and stuff you can do with it that I would rather keep HubSpot and make sure that it doesn't suck to use and it's efficient and stuff like that, and people can get in and get out and get on with their day, then go to something else just because my reporting will be easier.
Especially since I
So
think the
that was
reason
kind of
most
my
people,
logic on it.
yeah, I think it's great logic, especially because I think the reason that most people move is bullshit. Like, I think Salesforce is a great tool. Don't get me wrong. Like,
Yeah,
um, most organizations that I've worked for have been Salesforce shops. I've only worked at a couple of HubSpot shops, but
hmm
um, the big selling feature of Salesforce in my estimation is how customizable and how like extensible it is. You can turn it into whatever you want it to
yeah,
be, basically, right? But
yeah,
that's a blessing and a curse because most people you're basically handing a Ferrari to somebody who's never driven anything more powerful than a Civic in most
yeah,
instances, right? And that's just a recipe for disaster, in my opinion.
yeah,
Um, I don't know. That's just my folksy way
Yeah,
of agreeing with you both, I guess.
yeah. I feel like I don't know. There's like you don't necessarily need to have everything connect to your CRM, but that's when as soon as you have Salesforce, that's what you feel like needs to happen is
Yeah.
every single thing that you touch needs to be directly. That's how at least I felt when I was using Salesforce, and that's how I think a lot of people around me felt was like, we got to get this integrated and that integrated and that integrated, and I feel like you get to a point where you're just kind of over reporting on
Oh, for
things and
sure. Or going down the
you
path of
waste a
like
lot of time.
the 30 item drop down, right? Like
Yeah,
you end up
exactly.
with like 1,000,001 unused custom objects, and you have all of these plugins that like to solve one
Yeah,
particular pain point, and it like ends up nobody or one person uses it. Yeah,
yeah,
you just end up with a mess, I think, in most cases. Not to say that there aren't good Salesforce implementations. There are. And especially
yeah,
at small companies, it's basically when they use it the way it comes out of the box, it's typically the best scenario. But then
hmm
you might as well use HubSpot, right? It's because it's I
yeah.
don't know.
Save some money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Listen, Tim. I typically ask one kind of standard question at the end of all of these things, and we're coming up on time. Um, is
Okay.
there? We've been talking about technology to a certain extent. We've been talking about Salesforce and HubSpot, and is there a piece of technology or a tool that you think most businesses should like just can't live without, or that you personally don't think you could do your job without?
I mean, does the CRM count?
Sure. Yeah. You can use the
I mean, I can
CRM.
give other stuff
I
too, but
agree
like,
with you,
I
but
mean,
yeah.
for me, it's like whether you're, like a small business, like a small, Main Street business or, any other kind of business, you need to have a CRM. I feel like that would be the one thing that I would say that if anybody doesn't have it, then you need to get it.
Yeah.
And
See,
HubSpot is free to start. So,
Yeah, yeah.
there you go.
That's a
See,
good
my
that's a good plug. Go
my
ahead, Joe.
suggestion is always
yeah,
because I've come from a sales background
yeah.
is like call recording software of some sort,
I was going
right?
to actually
Like
mention that if, so like Gong, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's some like cheaper options out there now. Like
Yeah.
so we're early stage. I don't know if we're like investing in Gong or Chorus quite yet, but
hmm
like there's even some cheaper ones to get transcripts. And I think like that learning that you get from recordings
Yeah.
is super beneficial. But that's from a
Yeah.
sales perspective. So I don't know, like yeah, something else kind of fringe like that that is super important
Well,
now.
that was actually going to be, so if I wasn't allowed to say CRM, that would be, that's one that like, um, we've been, I'm new to, I think most people are newish to it, but, uh, I found to be extremely helpful, for like a bunch of reasons. First and foremost, probably just training and onboarding and stuff. Uh, because when we hire a new BDR or a new rep or whatever, they have this massive library of great calls and shitty calls that they can listen to and learn from, and pick and choose the parts that work for them that they you know don't like or whatever, and sort of get better at developing their pitch, especially if they can't sit down on everything. Um, and then um, it's also been really helpful for my team when we're doing like our forecasting and stuff like that. And it's like, wait, what exactly is going on with this account? You can literally just pull it up and find out exactly what the client said, and it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Um, so that one I would put in the like really great, nice to have, but the absolute need to have, I'd say CRM. So,
100%.
yeah.
Well, listen, Tim, great conversation. Thank you so much for carving out some
Yeah.
time to
Thank you
join us
guys.
here on the Revenue Cafe. If our audience wants to get in touch and either learn more about sales ops, what you do, or more about Jampp, how can they get in touch with either one of those?
Uh, LinkedIn is probably best,
Okay.
or I'm on Twitter at Tim Fagan.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
So
I guess it's jampp.com, right?
yeah, Tim@jampp.com
Cool.
is my. Oh yeah,
Um,
Jampp.com is the website. But yeah.
yeah, yeah. Awesome. Well, Tim, thanks again. Joe, thanks for coming along for the ride. Hope everybody listening found that interesting. Feel free to reach out to Tim if you got any burning questions. And as always, Joe and I are always available for a chat. Stay tuned for another episode of Revenue Cafe coming soon. Thanks again.
Thanks for watching the full episode. Make sure you subscribe. The social media links below. For more detailed info about what we do, take a look at breadcrumbs.io.